Hi everyone, my name is Inanula and I share years of personal experience in the fashion industry, giving you key insights into buying and merchandising skills. Today, I'm going to be diving into one of the most powerful tools in the fashion buying and merchandising toolkit, the Wizzy. So the Wizzy is your weekly sales stock and intake. It's the one tool that connects sales performance to stock flow and intake decisions. This is the framework that makes it all happen. When I started out in merchandising, the Wizzy felt like some kind of secret code. But once I cracked it, everything clicked. So if you're applying for a merchandising role or stepping into your first assistant buyer job, you need to understand the Wizzy. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to read the Wizzy and walk you through my very own downloadable template where you can plug in all of your own figures. So, download your copy of the Wizzy template and let's get into it. So, this is your Wizzy. And this is a basic Wizzy that I have drafted up. And your Wizzy is your weekly sales stock and intake. And it's basically just a huge calculator of week by week, month by month, and then half and quarter of all of the sales stock and intake that is happening in your seasons in the range. So right, first I'll show you, I guess, each half, which is your spring, summer up here, and then you've got autumn, winter down here. And it's usually broken up by half to look at those seasons separately. But then you can also go in and look by quarter because we've got cumed here. These columns have cumed for each quarter. So it just adds up each of the months within that quarter. And then your total here will add up for all of the months within that half, right? So I guess we shall start with the columns here, what each of these mean, and then that would help you really begin to read a Wizzy well or understand what's on a Wizzy. So for a start, we have actual sales. I'll zoom in a bit more just to make it a bit clearer. Your actual sales are the sales that have been taken, right? And so we can see here this week, week 9, we've got it highlighted. And what that means is that's the current week that we're on. That's the latest reported week that we are looking at. Because every week after that, we can see the actual sales column is empty. And that's because we haven't taken yet. We're not in that week yet. So your actual is just what's been taken. Then your forecast sales are the forecasted sales we thought we would take. And these forecasted sales get plotted into the Wizzy well before the season has begun. You know, as we can see here, we don't have actual, but we have forecasted sales. And that goes on all the way throughout the whole of the half, even into next half. We've got our forecasted sales happening because we would have plotted this down based on either last year's information. For example, here we've got last year's sales, you know, or we would have done it based on what we have bought for the range and what we think we will take, and all of those kinds of things get calculated to put on your forecasted sales. Then we have the difference between the two, and that's a calculation. That's basically your actual sales minus your forecasted sales divided by your forecasted sales. Then that gives us a nice difference percentage. So we know how we're doing according to our forecast. So for example, on this week, we're back 6% versus forecast. That's how we would report that as a trading stance. And we would say, you know, we thought we were going to take more, and that forecast is pretty much what we took last year. So we thought we would take the same as last year, but we haven't, right? So if we keep reading through, we'll probably understand why. And that would probably be due to the stock. So our stock is here. That's 114k that we've got here, but last year's stock was 167k, right? So we can see our stock is not the same as it was last year, and that would affect your sales, because if your stock is low, there's only so much that the customer has to buy from, right? They can't buy what's not there. So your stock is a nice calculation. Your stock is your stock from last week plus your intake from last week, and then minus the sales from this week. That's what makes your stock number. Yes, so that's a nice fun calculation. That tells us how much is sitting in our warehouse. Then we have intake. Intake is another thing that's plotted all the way through, and it would be pulled from all of the purchase orders that have been raised. Purchase orders, I will do a video on that. It's basically how much you have said to the supplier you want to buy, and then you would raise a purchase order, and then that would get put into the system on intake, because it would basically be saying this is how much is on order, this is how much we expect to get in. And as you can see, for all of the future weeks, that has been plotted down. We can see we've got healthy stocks coming in for the foreseeable future, really. And then it starts to slow off on like your June, then into next season, we've got a few gaps and it's getting smaller. That would be because we haven't plotted that far ahead. We're obviously still dealing with the season that we're in, right? So, yes, that's what your intake is. And then we will also tweak our intake based on how the season is performing. If we can see our sales are constantly very low, we would reduce our intake. We would either slow off the drops, or we would reduce the amount we're ordering from the supplier, and we would just make all of those tweaks the same way we make the tweaks on the forecast. We would make the same tweaks on intake, just so that we have a healthy season going on and things don't get too out of control. Then next we have cover, and cover is another calculation. And again, with all of these calculations, I will say, if you do want to check out my retail math video, I have done a very in-depth video on all of the retail math calculations that are done, and they're very useful. And they will help in getting you to understand something like this, the Wizzy. So definitely check out the retail math video for more insights on all of these calculations. Right, so yeah, your cover is basically your stock divided by your actual sales. That gives you your cover for the week. And what that means is it tells you how much the stock is going to last us. How many weeks is this stock going to last? Because it's one thing saying the number of the stock, like for example, 114k worth of stock here, but that doesn't tell us how long is that 114k worth of stock going to last. Is it a lot or is it a little? And this helps us because it looks at the sales versus the stock, and then it says, you know what, based on this week's sales, if we continue to take this amount at least, we are only going to last 1.8 weeks with this stock. And that's where intake is helpful, because then we say, okay, we need to build up our intake. We need to take in more to be able to make this cover last us a bit longer. Your average cover, ideally, you want to be looking at like minimum 4 weeks. So, something like 1.8 or 2.5, this is very quick cover, and you want to build your stocks higher. But as I can imagine, if this is January, you're probably dealing with, ex-Christmas stock and things like that. But at the end of the day, you want higher stocks than this. Then we have markdown, and your markdown is how much you have marked down to go into red ticket sale. That would be completely written off, and it's never going back to full price. So we can see here we've waited until week 6 to do our markdown. And that's £3,000 we've taken off. And so that would be reduced from your stock. That markdown comes out of stock because now we don't want to overinflate the amount of stock we have and think that we've got so much stock when really half of it has been marked down into sale and is never going back to full price. If it was a promotion, that's a different story, but this is red ticket sale. So that needs to be put down as a spend. We can see that last year our markdown was done in week 5, but this year we've done it in week 6, and that would possibly be because of the stock levels. So if our stock levels aren't as high as they were last year, we're probably going to wait a bit before we start marking it all down, because obviously we don't want to have completely nothing left on the shelves, right? So then we move on to sales versus last year. And that's another difference calculation. That is your sales minus your last year sales divided by your last year sales. Then that gives us your difference. And as we can see, we're back stock as well. Same thing. Your stock for this year minus your stock for last year divided by stock for last year. And we're back quite a bit, 32%. Right. So as we said, that would affect a lot of things. That has obviously affected us waiting a bit before we go into red ticket sale. It will affect our sales as well. We can't take that much if our stock is low and all of those kinds of things. So, yeah, but then we can see as we go ahead, the weeks continuing, the stock starts to build versus last year. Now we're up versus last year. And that would be because of our intake. We have built our intake up. We're taking in quite healthily each week, quite big numbers. So all of that now comes into play. I hope you can now start to understand how this is all coming together. So then lastly, we have your last year cover, which is again just calculating for you what the cover was last year. And obviously you can see it was slightly higher last year, and then markdown as well. So how did we do on markdown last year? Then, as you can see, we've got it all cummed for you. So the months just literally give a total of all of those for you. It gives a total of your stock by month. It depends on how you want to view it. And then we would cum it as well for the whole quarter. So that would just be adding all of the months in that quarter and so on. And then, yeah, we just keep going until the end of the year, all your 52 weeks. That's really that. That's how we look at a Wizzy, and that's how we control our weekly sales, stock and intake. So thank you so much for listening. Drop a comment with any questions or anything you'd like me to explain further or go deeper into. So thanks.
The Access to Fashion member newsletter gives you direct access to practical resources, buying and merchandising templates, and industry standard tools that are expert approved. Subscribe now and get immediate access to exclusive downloads and practical tools that will give you a real edge and keep you ahead of the curve. Visit the link below to join now.